Police officers responding to an auto burglary in progress here last week found the suspect sitting in the back of a Ford van with a machete in hand. Over the next 3 hours, a growing law enforcement group that included a crisis negotiation team and tactical operations experts encircled the suspect. He refused to leave the van, so they engaged him in dialogue. At 8:37 p.m., the suspect, Marcel King, a 34-year-old black man, exited the van without his machete and surrendered. By isolating the scene, calling for backup and generally de-escalating the situation, "We got a peaceful resolution," said Lieutenant Michael Nevin, who heads training at the San Francisco Police Department's Field Tactics Force Options Unit. "No news incidents are the great news incidents. The calm standoff in San Francisco stands in contrast to many high-profile police encounters that have ended in violence in recent years. Notably the death of George Floyd while in police custody in May 2020, which started a global movement against racial injustice and excessive use of force by police. More recently, there was the killing last weekend of Daunte Wright, a 20-year-old black man who was shot by a white police officer in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. And the shooting last month of 13-year-old Adam Toledo by Chicago police officers. Those deaths and others have sparked renewed calls for law enforcement training that focuses on serving all members of a community, especially people of color vulnerable because of systemic racism, and puts a premium on de-escalation tactics that minimize violence. But experts say a patchwork approach to police reform has left the nation at a critical crossroad with no clear path forward. Chief among a number of challenges, the nation's myriad law enforcement departments each operate under their own guidelines, making the adoption of a unified standard of protocols difficult. The result is some cities are working to update their methods, while others may lack the resources or inclination to do so. With 18,000 police agencies and 80% of them having fewer than 50 officers, that is no national way for them to get best practices, said Chuck Wexler, Executive Director of the Police Executive Research Forum, a non-profit that provides resources for police officials. And the training in de-escalation hasn't fundamentally changed in 25 years. Big changes may come if Congress passes the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, which calls for mandatory training and the creation of a national registry cataloging incidents of police misconduct. The bill has passed in the House but has not yet been scheduled for a vote in the Senate. Meanwhile, a handful of local lawmakers and law enforcement agencies have taken steps toward reform. Two recent shifts include the removal of qualified immunity for officers in states such as New York, Colorado and New Mexico, and the handling when applicable of 911 calls by mental health professionals, which cities such as New York and Eugene, Oregon, are pioneering. But some caution that hurdles to reform remain significant. There are roughly 1,000 police incidents of deadly force as well as 50 officer deaths each year. These cases show police disproportionately kill black people. Our communities are over-policed, over-surveilled and under-resourced, said U.S. Representative Cori Bush, D. Missouri, who supports the Defund the Police movement that seeks to redirect government funding to social services. Decades of placing more money into police training and relying on piecemeal reform have yet to make our communities safer. Police training varies in quality. Experts say while most police departments do run officers through some kind of de-escalation tactics program, the quality and efficacy of such classes can vary greatly, experts said. In the case of Derek Chauvin, the former Minneapolis officer on trial for the death of Floyd, prosecutors pointed out that he took 40 hours of training in 2016 on how to recognize people in crisis. Expert witnesses also noted that it was not protocol to use a knee or leg to detain suspects. Yet Chauvin remained kneeling on Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes as he protested that he could not breathe. Floyd was stopped by police over the alleged use of a counterfeit $20 in a convenience store. The growing chorus for police reform started in 2014 after 18-year-old Michael Brown was shot and killed by an officer in Ferguson, Missouri, after an altercation. A year later, the officer involved was cleared of wrongdoing by the Justice Department. A judgment that led to protests both peaceful and violent and fueled the rise of the Black Lives Matter social justice movement and a national conversation on police reform.